Okay, good evening. Welcome to Research CP, an initiative to set a patient-centered research agenda for cerebral palsy. Welcome to the Research CP Overview, Webinar 1. We've got 5 webinars in our series. And this is a Eugene, Washington, PCORI funded workshop. It is sponsored by CPNOW and the Cerebral Palsy Research Network. My name is Paul Gross. I'm the founder and chairman of CPRN, and I will be joined tonight by Dr. Ed Hurvitz, who is the professor and chair of physical medicine and rehabilitation at the University of Michigan Medical Center. Before I dive in, I just want to set a few ground rules for how this is going to work. We've got about 30 minutes of presentation, during which time you all remain muted. There is, as you see, a chat function. So if you can send me if you have a question, it's a clarifying question for me or Dr. Hurvitz, you can send me a specific chat. But I'd like to ask you that during the presentation, you save those to just be if we stated something that you didn't understand that you feel like is making it difficult to understand the presentation. We will have plenty of time for Q&A and discussion for the concepts overall at the end of the webinar. So I'm going to dive in. So our agenda is to talk a little bit about who we are on this call and why we're all coming together and what is it that we're trying to accomplish. And I'm going to take you through how we see Research CP as achieving these goals. We're going to talk a little bit about collaborative research and what does it mean to have a collaborative research network. And then we're going to talk a bit about how and what research is funded, and then we'll just conclude with next steps. And for those of you that are on audio only, I had sent out the slides. You can do your best to follow along with those if you have them on another device, but I'm going to proceed with the slides now, so moving on. So who are we and why we're here? Well, if you were to look across the set of people that are connected to this webinar, that have signed up for this webinar, it's a broad brush of both clinicians, doctors and therapists that treat people with CP, and members of the CP community, people with CP, people that are their parents or caregivers for people with CP. There are also patient advocates, people that work in organizations that try to advance research or the needs of the CP community, and a number of leaders for advancing the state of research for cerebral palsy. And why have we come together? To establish a list of priorities for research or for the improvement of outcomes so that we can focus efforts on improving the lives of people with cerebral palsy. The other reason why we've come together is to build relationships among the people within the CP community, along with the clinicians and therapists, the providers, the professionals that are committed to advancing CP research. So what are we trying to accomplish in bringing these groups together? We're trying to determine what are the most pressing problems in CP care, and what are the key research questions, the most important research questions that the community wants to see answered. We're also trying to bring together the CP community broadly, both this group of committed clinical researchers, and so that's a catchphrase, and since we've got a broad array of people. So a clinical researcher is someone who is a clinician, a practitioner that treats people with CP that is also interested in advancing research. So we want to bring together the community of people with CP and caregivers at the very beginning of the process for figuring out what is important, what are the priorities in CP research, with a group of committed clinical researchers. We also hope to establish a long-term relationship between these members of the community and these stakeholders that are providers for people with CP, because the best way to conduct meaningful research is to do that as a collaborative effort to advance the care for CP between the community and clinicians. And then once we've done this, what we want to do is establish this list of priorities and broadly communicate our findings to the whole CP community. So the CP community knows what we're focused on, and the clinician researchers can go and pursue these research questions in collaboration with the community, and the broader community that treats people with CP can know that there are findings coming to create a greater evidence base for the best way to treat people with cerebral palsy. And we're going to do this by focusing on high-quality research. So what are the ways in which we can improve these outcomes and solve these questions? The end result is where the arrow points, to improve outcomes for people with cerebral palsy. So how does Research CP do this? How will we advance these goals? We're going to engage a representative group of people from the CP community. So when we gathered information in just that registration, we asked you a few simple questions if you were a person with CP or a caregiver of a person with CP. And we have people that across the whole spectrum of people with CP. And so we're trying to really get people both geographically diverse, racially diverse, but also involvement and type of CP diverse, so that we can get a very representative set. And we're bringing together a set of stakeholders from all of the different disciplines that treat CP. So we have developmental pediatricians, we have neurologists, we have physical medicine and rehabilitation docs, we have physical therapists, we have occupational therapists, we have speech and language pathologists, we have orthopedic surgeons, we have neurosurgeons. The main disciplines that treat cerebral palsy are being brought together as part of Research CP. So the webinar series is the first part of this, and the goal of running 5 webinars is to establish some degree of common language about key elements of research, so that when we come together for a face-to-face meeting, we'll be speaking more of the same language and we'll have some understanding of what it is we're trying to move forward. So we have 4 more webinars after today, one focused on clinical research and comparative effectiveness methodologies, and that's next week. Now, comparative effectiveness I underline because it is a very big term that just means it's about comparing existing treatments that are done today to determine which are better for people, which have better outcomes. And so that is what comparative effectiveness is. And clinical research is a specific kind of research. It's research that is done as part of the clinic, i.e. you come into the hospital or you have a surgery, and the clinicians or doctors or therapists that are taking care of you, they gather data as part of their standard note-taking about you, and it's using that data to perform research, as opposed to basic science research, which happens in a lab, potentially with animals or genetics or all sorts of different aspects to basic science research. The next one is about quality improvement methodologies, which are another way to improve outcomes, but it's a much more iterative process where you see results more quickly and work sort of systemically to make changes in outcome. The fourth one is about what it means to do patient-centered research and how is that different than the research that's been conducted over many, many years. And a lot of that is about this process that we're starting here. And also patient-centered outcomes. So you can measure clinical outcomes. You know, if we operated on a joint, is the joint in place, you know, in the socket appropriately? That's one kind of outcome. But then a patient-centered outcome might be how the patient walks. Does the patient walk better as an example of one type of intervention. So those patient-centered outcomes are a key element, and we'll be talking about those on March 29th. And then the last webinar is on patient registries, or how data about patients can be brought together into a database to help guide research. So there are clinical patient registries that collect the data from people coming through the hospital, and there are patient-reported registries that are the types of patient-centered outcomes that I talked about. We'll be talking about the impact of both of those types in those webinars. And then finally, Research CP in this context is asking you to be engaged by not only watching the webinar that we're going to put up, but we're going to have a short survey that follows each webinar to reinforce your learning and to help us plan based on how well we educated as we come into our workshop in June. So the second piece of Research CP beyond the webinars is a collaborative survey platform. And I have a few screenshots here that are showing you some of what the environment's about. As we've tested it with a number of people, it's very easy to use. And so we're going to invite you to participate in this collaborative survey platform to say what you think the important questions are or the important improvements in care that need to happen. And we're going to reach out both to the clinical community through the American Academy of Cerebral Palsy and Developmental Medicine, which is the society where most people that treat people with CP are members, and we're going to reach out to those of you from the community to get feedback on this. And so we're going to run this collaborative platform for about, pardon me, I'm going to see if I can make this a little bit bigger for people. I just noticed that someone said, can we make it bigger? And I do believe there's a mechanism to fit it to your screen on your application. Anyway, so this we're gonna send this out, and this is going to allow you to do things like you can either look at what other people have put and vote in comparison of them, and this is going to provide an essential base of a broad array of questions, research questions, and improvements to clinical care that the community overall thinks are very important. So then, Research CP seeks to advance these goals by organizing a workshop. And this is a face-to-face workshop that will happen in Chicago, June 16th and 17th. And the goal was to synthesize all of this community input. So this is going to be professionally facilitated by a woman named Hillary Heil, who has experience doing exactly this for other disease groups, bringing together a broad array of people that work on a condition and taking all of their input and then working to come up with a meaningful, prioritized research agenda. The face-to-face meeting will include approximately 20 people from the community and approximately 15 clinicians. That's what we have budget to support. And the participants will be selected as a function of your engagement in Research CP overall. And so your engagement in these webinars and the follow-up surveys and the community collaborative survey to set research priorities are key elements. So we're looking for you to be interested in coming to this meeting by participating all the way through. And we will have a very brief application, and we will send out a link to that application at the end of the call this evening. Applications will be due on March 31st, and we'll notify people as to whether or not they've been selected by April 10th. We'll try to follow up quickly to work with you to make sure you get travel booked by the middle of April for this mid-June meeting. Community invitees to this meeting will be reimbursed for their approved hotel and travel expenses and be provided with a stipend of $600 for their time at the meeting. For the professional community, we're going to ask that the participants that do not have travel coverage will be able to get appropriate coverage for their travel, but if they have support in their budget, that they supply that. And what will come out of the Research CP workshop is a prioritized patient-centered research agenda. So this is, you know, a key step in that getting to improving outcomes. And then the last thing that Research CP does to advance these goals is tries to share the results. So we're going to create this agenda in the form of a paper that describes the process we went through and the nature of it, and shares what that research agenda is. And we're going to share it very broadly through the AACPDM or the Academy. We're going to seek to publish that paper in the journal that's most consumed by people that treat people with CP. And we're going to promote it very broadly through social media, so you will be able to know what that agenda is. And so everyone will be able to take that away from it. And then the Cerebral Palsy Research Network is going to use this agenda to plan research studies. So we're going to actually pursue these actual research questions through our collaborative research network. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time defining that in a moment. We're going to form, and we've already formed, cross-discipline teams, meaning when someone's treated with CP, they very often are seen by multiple professional disciplines. And we're bringing them together with people like you from the community so we can form this new type of team that constantly has the patient-centered view as part of the research process. And then CPRN also has the capability to measure the improvements in outcome over time. So Research CP should produce this agenda, which we and others will then go off and pursue, so that we can actually pursue these research questions and improve outcomes over time. So a collaborative research network is the concept of clinicians and institutions agreeing to work together on a condition. There are many of these across the world, and CPRN is one. It's a set of operating principles that people agree to prioritize and pursue research questions. And it is a fairly new thing that these pursue patient-centered research, that the community is involved at the very beginning of the process in determining which questions are the most important, which outcomes matter most to the community. And then there are opportunities to participate in the design and the execution of studies, which isn't necessarily for everyone, but it's a tremendous opportunity to shape the future of research, and also to help in the sharing of the results, the disseminating of the results. Collaborative research networks establish a rigorous mechanism for collecting patient data, intervention data, and outcome data over time. So it's longitudinal. It's used to study things not just for a 2 or 3 year period, but 5, 10, 15, and 20 years. Data collection is done at each site or each hospital, and then it's brought together in a centralized database or registry, which is used to understand trends in the population, find differences in the way treatment is done, see variations in outcome. And ultimately, the goal of a collaborative research network is to improve outcomes both through clinical research and through quality improvement. And as I said, these are 2 of our webinar topics that we'll be talking about in the next 2 weeks. So CPRN is a collaborative research network that is focused. Its mission is to improve outcomes for people with cerebral palsy. Today it is 18 centers and involves people from multiple disciplines that treat CP across the US and Canada. There are more than 25 clinical investigators that are already part of it, and we've been working together since beginning of 2015. There is also a data coordinating center which houses that data that I was talking about and manages our efforts, and that's based at the University of Utah. The core data project is a clinical registry and a patient-reported registry. So these 2 sides, these 2 different types of data that I've described, are included in our registries as part of CPRN. And it has been patient-centered from its founding and inclusive of the community. So, as I said, I am the chairman and founder of CPRN, and I am, first and foremost, the parent of 2 children, but a parent of a 12-year-old boy with cerebral palsy. And my partner in bringing the community in is Michelle Schusterman, who heads up CPNOW and manages all of our community relations and community engagement, and has been the way that many of you have probably found out about this effort called Research CP. So the concept of being inclusive from the beginning is built in. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Ed Hurvitz, Dr. Ed Hurvitz, who is the professor and chair of the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation at the University of Michigan. And I need to just find him in my list of people so that I can actually unmute him. There he is. Ed, you should be off mute and able to speak, and just tell me when you want to go to the next slide.
All right, Paul, are you able to hear me? Paul? Is everybody able to hear me?
We can all hear you, and I muted so so that I wouldn't make any additional noise.
Great, just wanted to be sure. Okay, thank you. All right, well, I would like to talk to everybody a little bit about how CP research has been funded. There's been a feeling among those of us who do research with cerebral palsy that cerebral palsy research is underfunded. So what I'd like to talk about today is where funding for cerebral palsy research comes from, and also what steps we need to do to increase that funding. So next slide, Paul. Next slide.
You're good, Ed.
Okay, great. All right. One of the primary places that fund research for all kinds of scientific research related to medical issues is the National Institutes of Health, the NIH. Back a few years ago, Paul joined with Dr. Yvonne Wu and a couple of others to do a study on cerebral palsy research funding from the NIH. And this data is from 2001 to 2013, looking at how much funding the NIH gives to cerebral palsy and where that funding goes. You see from the slide there that there's, over that 12-year period, there was $392 million in funding toward research that was directly related to cerebral palsy. There were 455 grants. Now, I should mention that one thing that's pointed out in this study is that there were research projects related to cerebral palsy, especially around preventing cerebral palsy in birth, which may have not had the term cerebral palsy in their title. They don't come up. So there may have actually been more than this, but this is a basic idea of how much funding went to cerebral palsy. If you look at the pie chart, you can get an idea of how that funding was broken down. About half of it went to clinical research, with 19% of that going for interventions, looking at different treatments for cerebral palsy, and 9% going for clinical trials, where those treatments were actually compared to people who were not having treatments. Those kind of studies are the gold standards we use to bring new treatments into the world of treating individuals with cerebral palsy. Basic science, basic science, which looked at cellular structure, brain biology, muscle structure, other aspects of the human body, cellular aspects of cerebral palsy, took up a significant chunk too, of 42%. And then there were a couple of other areas of funding, including training, which took up a small percent, and then infrastructure. Infrastructure are grants that are used to set up centers which can help other people do cerebral palsy related projects. The CPRN is actually an infrastructure type of entity, and we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. There's been a consistent increase in basic and clinical research for cerebral palsy, but I should point out that there's still a relatively small number of studies funded by the National Institutes of Health for cerebral palsy when one looks at the prevalence of cerebral palsy. In other words, cerebral palsy is the most common physical disability in children, and with that, compared to other diagnoses such as cystic fibrosis, for example, which greatly outstrips the amount of money that goes to research, we think that cerebral palsy should be getting more research funding from the NIH. And again, we'll talk a little bit about what we can do to help make that happen. Next slide, Paul.
You're up. National Institute for Disability.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Another federal agency that funds research for people with disabilities is the National Institute for Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. We who work in the field call this the NIDILRR, and it's part of the Health and Human Services, which is the same part of the federal government that funds the National Institutes of Health and also is in charge of health care and so forth. And NIDILRR is a agency that funds research, excuse me, completely related to disability. Now, the research they fund is generally related to clinical translation, and by that I mean by looking at how that research can actually apply and make a difference in people's lives. Rather than looking at mechanisms is looking at the human body and trying to figure out what's exactly going on in the human body causing various problems, or looking at comparative effectiveness, comparing two different treatments, as Paul mentioned, or looking at preventing cerebral palsy. NIDILRR looks at research that actually can change people's function and their lives and that sort of thing. There are about 5 studies that came up when I did a search through NIDILRR's funding that looked at cerebral palsy. I do know that they have more studies than that that deal with people with cerebral palsy. Many of those studies are large centers that look at various kinds of disabilities and maybe looking at engineering interventions, maybe looking at wheelchair interventions for people with different kinds of disabilities. Some of the areas of emphasis they have include technology, aging with cerebral palsy, mobility and mobility aids, health, wellness, and exercise. There are other federal agencies that also fund research of cerebral palsy, including the Center for Disease Control, and the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. Next slide, please, Paul. The next funding agency I want to talk about is the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, PCORI. PCORI is the funding agency that is funding the CPC conference and funding these webinars and so forth. So we want to definitely be thankful for them for doing that. PCORI is not really a federal funding agency. It is a non-governmental organization. It's actually tied to revenues related to the Affordable Care Act. So we're certainly hoping that PCORI will still be with us with all of the manipulations going on in Washington right now related to the Health Care Act. PCORI has an interest in comparative effectiveness research, as we've been talking about, and they fund many different medical problems, looking at different interventions, looking at comparative effectiveness. With relation to cerebral palsy, they're funding several studies, including looking at pain and cerebral palsy. They have a big study looking at health care of women with disabilities that includes cerebral palsy. They're looking at studies of cerebral palsy, looking at the developmental trajectory of motor skills, and they're looking at therapy intensity and comparative effectiveness. So those are some of the things PCORI is studying, and I would venture to say that there's probably people here on the webinar today that are the chief investigators on some of the studies that I've been alluding to. Go ahead, Paul, next slide. Another source of funding, as opposed to federal agencies or this non-governmental organization like PCORI, is from private foundations. Private foundations may come from the wealth of a certain individual who turns their money into a foundation to fund research, or it may be an organization that is started by grassroots, started by families, that gets together and raises money and funds research. There's several different ways that, that foundations can be started, but what they are is a group that has a certain amount of money that they can give out to various causes, including research. Some of the foundations that fund research include CP NOW, which is part of this webinar and helping to fund the webinar and the conference. Also, the Cerebral Palsy Foundation has classically funded research. It was called the Cerebral Palsy Research Foundation, and it has funded less research lately and has less grants coming out, but they're still funding research. CureCP is doing some work with stem cell research and other areas. The Cerebral Palsy Alliance Research Foundation is based in Australia, and they are funding cerebral palsy research with $19 million right now and 179 different projects. And they really cover the range of projects from prevention to treatment to quality of life. Another foundation that's funding cerebral palsy research is Pedals with Pete, which puts out a $25,000 grant. Both the Cerebral Palsy Alliance Research Foundation and Pedals with Pete collaborate with the American Academy of Cerebral Palsy and Developmental Medicine, the CP Academy, to give out grants for groups that want to do research. Next slide, Paul. So the question you may want to ask yourself is, how do we get more funding? Well, we need to do several things to increase the funding for cerebral palsy. One of the first things we need to do is to send better and more grants to the various agencies and foundations that I've described. So to do that, we need to work hard to train the next generation of investigators, to train them how to ask great questions about cerebral palsy and design great research projects and write excellent proposals and send them to these agencies and foundations. The other thing we need to do is advocacy, and that advocacy especially has to come from families and individuals with cerebral palsy. Many of you have heard the expression autism speaks, and when autism spoke, it really screamed, and it said quite a bit, and because of that, there's a lot more funding coming in for autism research. And finally, we need to create the
Uh-oh, sounds like we may have lost Ed. We'll give him another moment.
And by doing that...
Yeah. Hey, Ed, just so you know, you disappeared right after you mentioned advocacy, so
yeah,
I don't know
okay,
if you finished.
So the third thing we need to do is create infrastructure for multi-center studies. And one of the things that infrastructure has to do is to help us to get preliminary data. The Cerebral Palsy Research Network and the registry it wants to found is definitely a strong way to get that preliminary data, and the network that we're setting up is an important piece of infrastructure that will help increase our ability to better cerebral palsy research, and then to write better studies based on better preliminary data. And that was what I wanted to say.
Great, thanks, Ed. Okay, so let me summarize and talk about next steps. So, in summary, Research CP is really a whole community effort to set a research agenda that you as members of the community think are most important. It includes this webinar series, of which tonight is the kickoff and the first one. All will be recorded, so if you can't make this time, they'll be available for follow-up. This collaborative survey mechanism that's called CoDigital, a workshop, which is a face-to-face, but will also be live webcast workshop in Chicago in mid-June, and then a white paper or an authoritative paper that will be both published and whatnot, that basically lays out the results of this process to really drive the direction of future research. CPRN plans to pursue these top opportunities, and we really hope to work with the most engaged and committed researchers, clinical researchers, and those of you from the community who really want to work to make this happen. So the next steps will be, you're going to receive mail with very important links. The first one is just going to be a very brief post-webinar survey, and our goal is to really reinforce your learning and to sort of understand what we communicated well, what we didn't communicate well. So quite literally will take maybe 3 minutes, 5 minutes of your time. So when you get that, please follow up on that. We will also send the link to the application. The application does not take a lot of time. We're really looking more at how engaged people are in the webinar series, in the collaborative survey about outcomes and research questions, than anything you say in particular in the application. And again, very brief. And then you're also going to receive an invitation to this CoDigital survey collaboration platform where we have 2 questions. We're going to ask a question about most important research questions and a question about what elements of care you think need to, change or improve the most. And so, so you expect those, and so you don't have to apply to come to the workshop. I mean, you don't have to apply. You can just do the webinar series and watch the workshop from the comforts of your home. So if you're interested, please take the post-webinar survey, because it's just a critical thing that we're measuring, and then submit your application by March 31st. And then when you get this invitation to CoDigital, it's going to send you like summary mails on a regular basis. Check your spam filter. It could go there. What we're asking is that people engage for up to 5 minutes or more, but a minimum of 5 minutes per week. Look at what people have added. Rate them relative. The tool will take you through comparing different things. Add your own ideas and vote on those others, or suggest edits if you think there's something to improve. So those are the key next steps. And with that, I'm going to go into Q&A mode. And so let me just say a little bit, how this is going to work. I'm going to turn on Q&A mode. Depending on how you're connected, there will be a icon that appears at the top of where the details are about how many people are connected, and where you see the little chat icon and whatnot, to let you know you can click on that to be enabled to speak and to ask a question. If you're not connected with audio, you can post a question in the chat box. It could be a challenge with a number of people going, so we're going to do our best to manage that. Yeah, and so. Well, and people that are only audio, you can send an email to paul@cprn.net, and we can see if we can answer the question that way. I'll see if I can take a space where people at the end that are audio only can ask questions. So let me put it into Q&A mode. And now, if you click on that icon that appears to ask a question, I'll be able to enable you in order. And I see a question from Patty Lyons. Do we focus treatments to improve the quality of life, or do we focus on trying to find a cure? Many adults living with CP get very upset when I can't see the rest of the question, but let me say a qualifying characteristic about this research agenda. So we did some research back before an NIH workshop in 2014, where we asked people about basic science and clinical research, and about cure research and whatnot. And this effort is aimed at focusing on a clinical research agenda. So it's not the kind of research that you need to do cure research, like there are a number of groups that are focused on that. That is not what this particular research agenda is focused on. It's about trying to improve treatments that will improve the quality of life for people with CP. Okay, so I don't have, okay, I see a audio question starting to form, and I'm going to start. So just so you know, when I tell you you're ready to go, it's going to unmute your phone. You're going to hear that, and you can ask your question. So I think, Danielle, Daniel, I think you are now able to ask your question. Let's see if that works.
I think people should just do it on the chat.
Okay, I have a feeling the audio portion, so I'm going to ask you to just do it on chat if you could. So I think that's going to be more effective for us. It doesn't look.
So Amanda Sarah from you can answer that one. She's a clinician.
So actually, let me try the next one. Rochelle, Rochelle, you're up. Let's see if you can ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you, and I think everyone else can as well.
Oh, awesome. How much? My daughter's level 5. No, not you, honey. I'm sorry, my almost 8-year-old walked in. My daughter's level 5, and I guess I'm wondering how much of this is likely to help her.
Well, so part of what we're seeking to do is to get your feedback about what are the questions or what are the outcomes you want to see. So I think that there's tremendous opportunity to help, and it's a matter of getting the input for the community. It's not, I want to be clear that we're not going to say, oh, that we're only going to solve questions related to ambulatory kids with CP or something like that. We're trying to get a very representative set of questions and get a sense of what the community needs. And I think there are needs across the entire GMFCS, Gross Motor Function Classification Scale spectrum. Okay?
Okay.
All right. I'm going to continue on with a few more audio questions. I've got a 210 number. You are up. Let's see if you can try to...
Hi, Paul.
Go ahead.
Hi, Paul. I'm an adult with cerebral palsy, but I'm also an occupational therapist. So what would be the best way for me to answer these questions? I think I registered as just a person with cerebral palsy or an adult with cerebral palsy, but I just want to make sure I'm the most useful to you either way or in both ways.
I think there'll be room to express that on the application, and so I would not leave out that you're an adult with cerebral palsy. So, but I would put both of those facts in there. I would fill it out as an adult with cerebral palsy and put in one of the text fields the additional information about what you do professionally.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to go to I'm going to try to alternate here, although I'm slightly.
It's *6 for anybody who wants to ask a question auditory-wise. If they don't
thank you.
Already.
Thank you. So there are so many questions. I'm having trouble just getting back
to
one.
To a clinician. There's one for you. Amanda Serafian.
Yeah, so Amanda asked the question. I'm a clinician and a doctoral student. My research is interested in GMFCS and MACs 4 and 5 in natural hospital environments. Do I have to connect with a hospital? So you need to connect with someone. So in the case of CPRN, as an example, you need to connect with someone that is a CPRN center and investigator, and those are listed on our website. So you should be able to do it that way. So I'm going to take my next question now from Agnes. If you can, I think I've unmuted you so you can speak. Your question is?
Sure. I'm just curious. We're looking for qualitative research, correct?
So say that again. I didn't hear the.
Or you are aiming at qualitative research, not quantitative research.
No, that's not. So the question was, are we aimed at qualitative research versus quantitative research? And I think we're looking at a very broad range. Ed, I don't know if you're still there and unmuted. You probably would address this better than I. But there are very quantitative ways to measure things like quality or patient-centered outcomes. So it's a matter of developing or finding validated measures for those things. So no, we're very focused on rigorous data collection and high quality research, and it's not there will be some elements that are qualitative, but it will be a lot of quantitative research. Okay. I'm going to see if I can go back to where I was in the long list of questions on. Pardon me one moment.
There was Jessica Kruger-Decker. So stem cell therapy is something you considered in looking at a treatment option?
So hold on, I'm being so a stem cell therapy is something that is being seriously considered and looked at as a treatment option. So there is a lot of work going into stem cell therapies and evaluating it. It is not something that is on the as we go to plan this agenda. It is not at this stage. It's not a clinical. It's not one of the items that will be on the clinical priorities because there's more translational science that needs to be done, and many of those therapies are at the much earlier stages. So once they went through some of those earlier phases, they could be considered, but not at this phase. So I'm now going to take Brian. Let's see if I unmuted you. Go ahead, Brian, with your question.
Yes, well, this research focus on pharmacology or maybe medical marijuana or CBD oil?
So there's so again, we're not actually saying what the research is focused on. We're actually asking for input from the community and from clinicians as to what they think are the most important things. So that can certainly be suggested. But it is not, I don't want to presuppose that we're researching anything in particular. We're going to see what the community values most. Okay, I'm going to then try to go back to my, I'd be interested in large cell scale. That's not a question. Let me see if I can find one. Okay, there's a question from Christy Bjornson who says, I'm also very interested in finding out what families feel is helpful relative to orthotics for the children who walk and who use orthotics to support. I don't know if I can get the rest of that question. But Christy, I would say that's clearly a potential research area, and I would encourage you to engage in the survey platform and put what you think the most important research questions are there, and that would be great to have that as one of the things we're looking at on the agenda. I see queued up is Ed Hurvitz, who either has a question or is going to do a better job answering the question I answered earlier. So, Ed, I think you're unmuted.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. I was just actually you asked me something. I was trying to get unmuted again, but I just wanted to say you asked about qualitative and quantitative research. A registry will be mostly quantitative. Qualitative usually involves interviewing people, getting much deeper information, but certainly the quantitative studies we do can lead to qualitative. I also want to say that I'm with Christy in terms of very interested in orthotics, and especially the use of orthotics as people get older, which we all know that they tend to discard them, and what kind of effects that has.
Great. Well, Ed, I know you like the survey platform, so I'm counting on you to contribute there. Okay. There's a question I see that is there a listing of resources of sorts related to prominent research centers and specialists focused on adults with CP? I don't, and this might be a great one for Ed to jump back in on, so I'm going to unmute him in a second. I don't know that there is a single listing of that. I do know that we have a robust effort to look at research for adults with CPRN. One of the things that came out of the 2014 NIH workshop was the fact that the amount of research on adults was lacking. And they've recently released a strategic plan that talks about the fact that increasing the amount of research into adults is critical. So I think you're going to see more there. Ed, you should be unmuted so you can comment further on that.
When we talk about research in adults with cerebral palsy, one of the most important things we have to do is research on children with cerebral palsy, and particularly the comparative effectiveness research on the interventions. Because one of the things we really, really need to know is what are we doing to the children and how is that affecting them to help them be more functional as adults, or are we doing things to them that actually cause them problems with adults? That's going to be a big question that the CPN is going to give us the power to work with much more than any other research we've done. One of the things that's going to be really great about the registry. In general, though, there's going to be a focus on adults with cerebral palsy as part of the registry, and we have a set of questions that we're going to be asking adults with some emphasis on the adults themselves giving us input into the registry and answering some of the questions. So I'm very interested in the participants in the webinar who are going to be going on to the survey forum to be thinking about questions related to adults. Put those questions in so we can take a look at those and see what are the most important questions facing our adult population.
Great, thanks, Ed. I'm gonna try and take 2 more questions and then wrap it up. I did also want to point out that the AACPDM, the American Academy of Cerebral Palsy and Developmental Medicine does also have a list of clinicians that treat people, so that's another resource if you're looking for a definitive list. And so go to aacpdm.org to get more information there. I'm going to take a question from Nibel. Nibel, are you still there?
Oh, yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, I just want to say thank you for that AACPDM resource that I'll take a look at. I also wanted to see if there's any questions or any comments on. I have a doctor that wants to look into possible Botox injection, and I've heard that it could help. I've also heard that it can possibly be a poison, and just wanted to see, is Botox good for adults with cerebral palsy?
I will let, as a non-clinician, I will see if Ed comes back online. I will let Ed address that. Because that is outside of my range. But that is also not the kind. I mean, that's more of a question that we probably don't want to address here now. If you follow up with me in email, I'll maybe see if I can connect you with a resource to address that. I'm going to take us to the last question from Orion Case. Asked for the 20 community members in Chicago, how many do we anticipate being individuals with CP? I think between a third and half, and the reason why it might be less than half is because we've actually run a process that was run by Mary Gennady and Debbie Thorpe through CPRN to take input from a broad panel of adults with CP. So we are trying to make sure we also get quite a bit of input from parents and caregivers, but we anticipate between 7 to 10 people being people with CP that are going to be at that meeting. So I want to be conscious of the fact that it is it's 9 o'clock on the East Coast, and everybody's been very patient as we've had over 160 people at one point on this webinar, and for free software, I feel like it did a tremendous job, but definitely had to work through some rough patches. So thank you all for attending. There will be some follow-up emails. We really look forward to your engagement in the discussion. And if you have questions that haven't been answered, you can feel free to send them to paul@cprn.net, and I'll see if I can get those answered. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Dr. Hurvitz, for your time. Greatly appreciate it all.